Breakfast with friends on this Thursday morning, and time for us to say a very good morning to Mr. Nico Kleynhans. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, good morning. I'm alive. That's always a good idea.
It is. It's a
Good
very
start,
good
eh?
start. Yeah. So, Nico, today we're talking about self-help, figuring stuff out for yourself.
Yes.
Sometimes it's good, but then
Well-
there are other times when it's lousy.
Well, I'm particularly referring to Google because that's where we tend to go when we
True
need help.
story.
Now, earlier this week, I found an example of when Google is really helpful. What happened at a moment's notice is that Pick n Pay and FNB came to an agreement. And that agreement was that if you have an FNB account, one of these free accounts that they give, and you also have Pick n Pay loyalty card, you can go to any Pick n Pay store and get a loaf of bread for 99 cents.
Wow.
Now, they didn't advertise that all that much, but Google did. So that's when Google ends up being helpful. It's something you don't know. 99 cents is a pretty good price for government bread, and it's a lot better than the 22, 23 rand you would have paid had you not known about that. That's when Google is a good idea. But their time idea. And an example was a couple of years ago when a congregant was busy dying. And he contacted his pastor and said, I want the church to inherit everything when I pass.
Whoa.
So the pastor went out there top speed and said, let's draw up a will. Pastors shouldn't draw up wills. So using Google, the pastor drew up the will. And it basically said that if this person dies, the church will inherit. The pastor is the representative of the church, and the pastor also became a witness to the will.
Oh, that sounds...
Now, you can't do that.
No, I was just going to
You
say.
can't do that. So on the death of the person, the family read the will, went to an attorney, and said, the pastor signed as a witness.
But he's also the
You
beneficiary.
can't be a beneficiary and a witness. And so the congregation lost out.
Sure.
Simply because Google was used to draw up a will, and Google is not where you go for legal advice.
True story.
So that's when Google becomes a bad idea. Another one was recently, and this one was really giggled. I laughed a lot. The guy decides, I'm going to draw up my own will. I've got a house. If I die, the house must not be sold. The house must be rented out, and the grandkids can benefit from the rental income. But the house can be sold when the kids are 35 years old. Then in the will which he drew up himself, he says the testamentary trust must terminate when the youngest child is 25. So now we've got a conflict.
That's it.
25 and 35. Then we've got another conflict because there is a tenant staying on the property. And in the will, he says this tenant can stay rent-free until the day he passes.
What?
So what happens if he passes after the kids are 25 or
That's it.
35?
Exactly.
Now there's another conflict.
Yeah.
Now the guy realizes an attorney has to deal with the estate, and he names the attorney, but he doesn't show the attorney the will.
Oh, no.
And then he forgets all he's dealt with in the will is the house. What about all the other assets, the residue of the estate? He doesn't even mention that. So now the residue is hanging. The house has been defined with a conflicting age of termination. He's got a usufruct for the tenant, which is in conflict with the rights that is granted to his grandchildren. That will is going to be a mess. So fortunately, in that with all people who approach me, I read through the will very carefully. He's able to go back to the attorney this time and say, by the way, I appointed you as the executor. Please read the will and let's get it to comply with the law.
Exactly.
There are also times when Google can be a further problem. And this time it was between a mother and her son. They had problems. They both were believers, but they conflicted in what their belief system was all about. He felt his mother's lifestyle was not acceptable to his understanding of Christianity, and she felt his lifestyle was full of condemnation for her. And in her last will and testament, she decided that her entire estate would go to the Christian community of which she was part.
Okay.
And so on her death, in fact, the day before she died, she asked me to come to her in hospital. And as I was there, he was there as well. And there was a shouting match between him and her. Not
Oh,
her so
no.
much, because by then she was
Very
semi-conscious.
frail. Yeah.
But he was very aggressive and very angry with his mother. And on her death, he then took the will and tried to go to court and say, I am the son. She has no right to give the estate to her church. And of course, that's nonsense. And so we had to go to court to defend the will, which we did, and her community got the money. But I don't know what part of Google he was reading.
Yeah.
He was not automatically a beneficiary at his age of her estate. And the fact that he disagreed with her religious beliefs did not give him the right to insist. And then the last one, I think, was one who went to Google and got some financial advice in Google. And Google suggested that we were going to go through a tough time economically on the shares. And so she had a couple of million rand, which she put in a bank account and got nearly 4% interest, on which she's now got to pay tax. And 4% is below the CPI index, so she's in fact losing money, and she's got to pay tax. Whereas had she gone to a better source to get advice, she would have had an investment that's going to grow. She would not have been such a tax-heavy situation, and at least her wealth would have grown. Because of the way she took advice from Google, she has in fact severely impacted. So there are times when Google's a good idea, but there are times when it was not designed to give you the kind of advice that you are looking for.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Nico. Always good to chat to you. And thank you for reminding us that we need to talk to the experts and not think that online information.
Don't use Google, use
No.
your noodle.
Exactly.